It's my nerd world. Welcome to it, a Star Wars podcast. On the show this week, vintage Star Wars arrives on Disney Plus. What is vintage Star Wars? Well, I'll explain. Plus, some big news this week. We got the pretty much complete Obi Wan Kenobi live-action special event Disney Plus cast reveal. So I'll tell you who will be starring in the show and give you my thoughts on where the show could be going. Plus, we have your listener feedback. Thank you so much for checking out a Star Wars podcast here on My Nerd World. Let's get right to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
It's going to be a fun one this week. Been looking forward to it. It's Jon Justice, your host, here on My Nerd World, the Star Wars podcast. And as I said before, I'm really glad you're with the show again this week. So got quite a bit of news to talk about and some listener feedback. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. This is going to be one of the few episodes in a long time where we're not talking, at least at length. We do have some comments and listener feedback about the sequel trilogy, but we actually have some things to discuss. First off, we'll kick off with what landed on Disney Plus, and mentioned it, I think, on last week's show, but it is now available, and that is the Star Wars Vintage Collection. Miranda Alicia had actually written in about the Vintage Collection landing on Disney Plus, and she wrote this. I don't know if you saw, but Disney Plus has launched a Vintage Star Wars section. Was not expecting that, believe it or not. Maybe I didn't mention it on the show last week. Anyway, they got the old Ewok cartoons and the movies, a Wookiee short with Boba Fett, and finally the actual Clone Wars cartoons in 2D, which used to air on Cartoon Network. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about those. I hope they can put in the original Star Wars Holiday Special this year. Do not hold your breath. Can you imagine the reaction to these shows back then, especially with the Ewoks, because it looked like your typical campy, cheesy 80s entertainment. Can't wait to watch. So I got an article that I will share some thoughts from The Verge, and then I'll share my thoughts on what was released and what else is going to be added to this channel, which has me really, really excited. I want to mention up front, for as trivial as it is, the logo is rad. The Vintage Collection, and now the Star Wars Vintage Collection shows, is basically an offshoot of what started with collecting, right? And we don't get the standard 3 3/4 inch 5 POA action figures anymore. We do get some of those in sort of an old school retro version, they say. Now we get the Star Wars Vintage Collection, and I've got several items from the toy portion of the Vintage Collection, including the Imperial TIE Fighter and a lot of the action figures that came out with The Rise of Skywalker. And I mentioned this on a previous show, that was the one thing that I felt Hasbro, Lucasfilm, Disney screwed up on. And that is, I really wish that they would have closed out the saga with one more regular set of action figures like all the other lines that we'd gotten for all the other films, starting with the original trilogy. With Revenge of the Sith, we didn't get any of the standard 5 POA 3 3/4 inch basic figures on basic card backs. We only got Vintage Collection, and we did not get a very good sampling from The Rise of Skywalker. As a matter of fact, I'll bring it up again. If you happen to find a Vintage Collection Rey Skywalker action figure out in the wild. Oh, I think it's labeled just Rey. I have one, but I opened it up. And these are the 3 3/4 inch, but they are, I think it's 13 points of articulation. But these are the Vintage Collection Rey from The Rise of Skywalker. Pick it up, because it's very, very hard to come by. But what they've done here with the shows on Disney Plus is they basically adopted the same logo. And the logo is the logo back from the 80s. Specifically, it reminds me, and it looks most like the racetrack, the silver racetrack Star Wars top and bottom with the red lettering in the center that we got with most of the promotion for The Empire Strikes Back. When you go into Disney Plus and you look at the actual channel, they've rebranded all of the shows, and the Ewok Adventures have this new Vintage Collection logo on it. As a matter of fact, to be honest with you, the graphics on Disney Plus for the Ewok movies are arguably better than the films themselves. Look, they're 80s cheese, and we'll talk about that. So here's what The Verge had to say about the Vintage Collection. Disney Plus is getting a big influx of classic Star Wars shows and movies with their newly added Star Wars Vintage Collection. Most notable addition is the animated short The Story of the Faithful Wookiee, which famously saw the introduction of fan favorite character Boba Fett as part of the infamous Star Wars Holiday Special, which aired back in 1978 and was never released again. The short had previously seen the light of day as an Easter egg on the 2011 Blu-ray box set of the first 6 Star Wars movies, but the Disney Plus debut marks the broadcast release of The Story of the Faithful Wookiee to date. It is a very unique piece of nostalgia. The animation and the style of the animation for The Story of the Faithful Wookiee is very much in line with the 70s. It screams 70s. And if you've never seen it before, it's definitely worth a watch. It's a Star Wars cartoon. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's still going to be fun. But talk about pure nostalgia. The Story of the Faithful Wookiee from the Holiday Special, which is arguably the best thing that came out of the Holiday Special, is absolutely worthy to sit down and give it a watch. And like I mentioned before with Miranda's comment, I don't expect they're ever going to release the Holiday Special. I've got it. You can find it online. It is rough, man. Even from a nostalgia standpoint, it is so. I mean, it's that borderline so bad it's good, but it's really not good. It's also the first time any piece of the Star Wars Holiday Special has been broadly released since originally airing back in 1978. Fans hoping for the rest shouldn't get their hopes up, though. The company confirmed to IO9 that there are no plans to release more of the widely panned special in the future. Also newly added on Disney Plus is the Genndy Tartakovsky 2D animated Clone Wars series, which aired on the Cartoon Network back in 2003. The stylized series was the first Star Wars show to try to fill the gaps between Episode 2 and 3, something that the CGI animated Clone Wars show would eventually expand on in the future. Unlike the more modern series, which is included in Disney's current canon storyline, along with its successor spin-offs of Rebels and the upcoming Bad Batch, the Tartakovsky show isn't considered part of the official timeline anymore. That said, elements that the show introduced, like the villainous cyborg General Grievous, have been included in other Star Wars media. And that's not the only character either. We'll talk about this in a moment. But there was a villain called Dirge, of which I still have, because I've got a bunch of still on the card back Genndy Tartakovsky 2D animated Clone Wars action figures, because they put out a whole line connected with this series as well. So I've got a carded Dirge, and I think I have a carded Yoda. I have to look; it's behind me in my cabinet. Lastly, the collection adds several out-of-print shows and movies from the 1980s, including the live-action TV shows Caravan of Courage, An Ewok Adventure, and Ewoks: The Battle for Endor, along with the animated Ewoks cartoon, none of which have been easily available since they were released on VHS. Additionally, Star Wars Droids, the animated series, is planned to arrive on Disney Plus later this year. So, again, for what's available, you have Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure, Ewoks The Battle for Endor, Story of the Faithful Wookiee, Ewoks, and Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars. Now, before we talk a little bit more about the Clone Wars series, which I love, and I'll explain why, I did sit down and watch a bit of the 2 Ewok movies, okay? And look, they're rough, man. Again, they're fun from a nostalgia standpoint. Certainly interesting to see, comparatively speaking, what live-action Star Wars back in the 80s, 84 and 85, or 84 and 86, I believe, was compared to, obviously, what we're getting now. But they're a bit, at least in my opinion, they're a bit of a slog. I didn't have those as a kid. I vaguely remember watching those when I was younger, and even being a kid raised on Star Wars, I didn't ever have much affinity for them. And I think a lot of that really stems from my first love was always the films, and that's carried into adulthood. Expanded quite a bit now with all the available content that we can take in. But when I was growing up as a kid, it really was just the original trilogy films that I stuck close to. I had a smattering of books and comic books. Ewoks, I'm not even sure how much of the Ewoks cartoon I watched. I was also aging out right around that time, because by the time that Return of the Jedi came out, I was approaching like 13, 14, and was getting into BMX racing at the time. And while I still loved Star Wars, my passion for Star Wars did not return until later I got into my 20s. And really that long 90s stretch before we ended up getting any word about the prequels, was when I kind of began my fandom. My fandom kind of kicked back up, and then certainly the moment it was announced that we were getting the prequel trilogy, is certainly when my fandom kicked back into high gear as an adult. Now, getting to the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, I cannot say enough good things about these two seasons. I really, really do adore these Clone Wars series, and I'm not the biggest, I don't want to say animation fan, because I do like the animation, but I'm not the biggest 2D animation fan. Like, I definitely, prefer what we get nowadays, starting with Toy Story and then, of course, with Clone Wars and Rebels and whatnot. That being said, Genndy Tartakovsky did something really, really special with this Clone Wars series. They are incredibly unique. The storytelling is a lot of fun and really compelling. And I have, on many occasions, sat down and watched both seasons, because I have the DVDs. Watched both seasons, and then sat down and watched Revenge of the Sith, because it really is, or done the entire prequel trilogy, watched Attack of the Clones before we got the newer Clone Wars, and then watched the Clone Wars 2D animation going into Revenge of the Sith, just to flesh out the storytelling. So here's a couple of notes about this. And I was so excited when they announced that we were getting these, because the DVDs are fine quality-wise, right? It's 2D animation, so it can't be that bad, but there still is a bit of that pixelation that you get on some DVDs because of the high-definition TVs that we use now. That is completely taken care of watching it on Disney+. The picture is fantastic. So they combined all the episodes with no breaks. So originally, these were shorts, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. And so in between every episode, it would restart. There would be a logo that popped up, this crackling, and then it would say Clone Wars, and the show would start. It's not really all that different from what we got in the Clone Wars, minus the grandiose music. In terms of the way that the logo pops up, the logo's a little bit different, but it just kind of, you get the Clone Wars and then the show starts. But what they've done now on Disney Plus is they've combined all the episodes of season 1 and 2 with no breaks. And so you can watch season 1, which is a little over an hour, and then you can watch season 2, which is a little over an hour, and it gives you a 2-hour plus experience. And again, while it's not canon, it is wholly entertaining. There is a mix, and you can tell, but it's not jarring. It all fits together, but there is this really unique mix in as much as they use classic 2D animation. But when it comes to many of the flying and vehicle scenes, they use this 2D computer animation that's really, really slick. If you've watched Futurama did the same thing. There was just a bit of a different dynamic of the ships flying around. Even though it was still 2D animation, it gave you the opportunity to sort of shift the perspectives around faster to give you pacing that was a lot better for action sequences than if they had just done straight up 2D animation. The visuals are also pure Star Wars. I've read a couple of interviews with Genndy Tartakovsky from back in the day, and he was a massive Star Wars fan. And it's clear from watching the show that he, much like Jon Favreau did, right, pulled a lot of the visuals and some of the writing directly from the films. And you can just see that in the shots, right? If you're a Star Wars fan, you're familiar with Star Wars beyond most all other entertainment. And so when there is a shot that's framed a certain way, it's easy to go and look at it and go, that looks like it was from blank. One of the first examples that pops into my head would be from episode 1 of The Mandalorian, where in that first episode we see the speeder going across the frozen water and just going horizontally across the frame, which is a direct mirror to the shot that we get of the sand speeder, the land speeder on Tatooine from A New Hope. In the first episode or the second episode, I think it's the second episode, there's a shot where a bunch of Republic ships are coming down onto a planet, and it's a bunch of Republic gunships. And they come across frame horizontal, and it mirrors the snow speeders on Hoth as they go and they cut across frame, heading towards the AT-ATs. And as a space vehicle, space battle fan, almost everything regarding the vehicles in this Clone Wars series is pitch perfect and surprisingly grand in scope. The Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars did what The Rise of Skywalker did long before The Rise of Skywalker did it. And what I mean by that is they tried to put as many starfighters on screen at a time. There's one shot in the first couple of episodes where a Republic cruiser shows up over the planet, and they're going to fly down, and it looks like a couple hundred of these V-wing Torrent starfighters come out of the bottom of this Republic cruiser. And the same thing rings true for the gunships when they come onto the planet. You've never seen so many. It just, and for 2D animation to evoke like that kind of spectacle, it is really, really impressive. The pacing it's got wicked fast pacing too, especially the first season, because the first season, these were all roughly 3-minute shorts. And so they would tell a story in really quick succession in a very short period of time. That expanded to, I believe, 10 minutes plus on season 2. They broadened it out a bit, because this was all an experiment for George Lucas. George Lucas wanted to see what the Clone Wars could be in animation before he moved on to doing the 3D animation. So the pacing of the show is awesome. It really is super cool. And it's a perfect run-up, as I mentioned, but albeit now somewhat dated with the Clone Wars 3D animation, right? It's a perfect run-up to Revenge of the Sith. It does tell an alternate point of view that leads directly into Revenge of the Sith that I don't believe we have completely seen fleshed out yet. So the closest that we got was those final 4 episodes in the last season of Clone Wars. But that was mostly, Mandalore and Ahsoka's point of view. What the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars series does is it gives you a bit of what was happening on Coruscant when Coruscant was initially attacked, how Palpatine ended up getting captured, which leads into Revenge of the Sith, and then also when Anakin and Obi-Wan are actually called into the fight. The character that I was speaking of earlier, along with Grievous, which we'll talk about here in a moment, is Dirge. Dirge is a male Jedi bounty hunter who was active in the galaxy for almost 2,000 years, able to survive several near-death situations due to his Jedi heritage and enhanced battle armor. He fought in several wars and collected a multitude of bounties. He's now canon, and he's appearing in a comic book. So they just put him out in a recent comic. So Dirge has now entered into the canon. Also, it was our first introduction into General Grievous. Now, Grievous changed quite a bit by the time we saw him on screen, but it still is, and I remember when the Clone Wars came out, how excited I was as a fan, because I knew that we were going to be getting our first on-screen look at this new villain coming in Revenge of the Sith. So, look, I really cannot say enough good things about the Clone Wars series, and I think the biggest testament to how much I enjoy it is, again, the fact that 2D animation is not really my bag. And this is a ton of fun. And as a matter of fact, I think Kyle, my 14-year-old, and I are going to sit down and watch all of them tonight, because he's just as excited about watching them again as I am. All right, let's switch gears and go to our other big news item this week.
No, my father didn't fight in the wars. He was a navigator on a spice freighter.
That's what your uncle told you. He didn't hold with your father's ideals, thought he should have stayed here and not gotten involved.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
You see what I did there? See, because I'm going to talk about Obi-Wan, but I went and I used a clip where it was Obi-Wan talking about the Clone Wars, because I just talked about the Clone Wars. See what I did there? Yeah. Obi Wan Kenobi series reveals main cast set 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. All right, so the details that we have here come from Entertainment Weekly, and then I will share some of my thoughts. So an impressive cast has been set for Obi Wan Kenobi, the upcoming Star Wars TV show, a TV series featuring Ewan McGregor as the titular Jedi Master, and Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader. Directed by Deborah Chow, who helmed 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. The new series for Disney Plus will star Moses Ingram from The Queen's Gambit. Joel Edgerton, boy erased, also played Uncle Owen. Bonnie Peace from The Vow, also played Aunt Beru. Kumail Nanjiani from The Eternals. Idra Varma from Game of Thrones, Rupert Friend from Homeland, O'Shea Jackson Jr. from Straight Outta Compton, Sung Kang from F9, Simone Kessel from Reckoning, and Uncut Gems director Benny Safdie. I've heard a lot of people talking about Benny Safdie, and I am completely unfamiliar with Benny Safdie. The series, officially titled Obi Wan Kenobi, is set 10 years after the events of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, which featured Obi Wan Kenobi having to face his former Padawan Anakin Skywalker, who became corrupted by the dark side. The film ended with the famous Jedi taking the newborn twins, Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa, into hiding. Sources tell EW that Ingram, who featured as Jolie opposite Anna Taylor-Joy's Beth in The Queen's Gambit, has a very important role in the series. We also have the casting suggesting that we might meet a young 10-year-old Luke at some point in the series. And I would expect that, especially given the inclusion of Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The cast announcement heralds the start of production this April. That would be the month that we're already in. Filming was originally planned for a much earlier date, but McGregor confirmed in January last year that the series was pushed back a little bit due to the scripts. The scripts are excellent, and they just want them to be better, he said at the time. Chow, McGregor, Kathleen Kennedy, Michelle Rejwan, and writer Joby Harold will executive produce the series. Christensen's return in the role of Darth Vader was announced during a massive Disney investors presentation, which also signaled a massive expansion of the Star Wars franchise. Obi Wan Kenobi now joins The Mandalorian as just one of a multitude of Star Wars series, both live action and animated. All right, so I don't have a ton of commentary. Actually, I don't have much commentary at all to give with regard to the cast. I think it's a really interesting cast, obviously a very diverse cast, which is cool. But again, to go down the road of speculation is a little tough. I know that Miss Kessel had posted a comment that she gets to play with lightsabers when she mentioned on Twitter the casting reveal. I don't put a ton of stock in that. I know some individuals were saying it could be a young Ahsoka. I kind of doubt that personally, but who knows? Anything is possible because I still think you could get away with Rosario Dawson even though it's been quite a long time. Well, yeah, it might be a little tough. But to have somebody say, I get to play with lightsabers, and filming hasn't started yet, and lightsabers is just akin to Star Wars, I don't really put a ton into saying this person might be this character or this character, right? It also could be something that we'll talk about here in a moment as we gauge comments made in canon content that could be included in this particular series. So, this is what I wanted to talk about. If you go back a few episodes, I spent one episode going over a bunch of rumors about potentially what could happen in the Obi Wan Kenobi show. A lot of this was compiled just based off of comments that have been made by individuals since the show was actually announced. What I want to do in today's episode is I want to look at the comments that were made that are in canon of things that we could get context for. Lucasfilm has shown quite a bit that they are willing to go and provide answers to comments that have been made in original content with the new content, right? So, let's start off with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Since we know now that the two characters that played them in the prequels will now be appearing in the Obi Wan Kenobi show, then we can take what few comments that they made that could apply to this particular timeline and extrapolate upon it from there. Up front, I want to say, I think it's really rad that they're bringing back both the actor and actress to reprise these roles. I really, really do dig that. Again, along the same lines as bringing back Tamura Morrison to play Boba Fett as the clone from the prequels. I just think that is just really cool. And I'm glad that Disney is embracing that and taking advantage of the fact that these characters would be aged appropriate for the original actors that played them, and we can continue to fill the gap in. Because that really does lend credibility to this series. When you watch the prequels and this show being the next piece of content and storytelling in the timeline, it just makes all the sense in the world that we're using the same characters. All right, so these are the comments that were made, right? First off, we've got Uncle Owen in A New Hope. He said, that wizard's just a crazy old man. And then you have Beru saying, right, Luke's just not a farmer, Owen. He has too much of his father in him, right? And then Uncle Owen follows that up with, that's what I'm afraid of. Okay, so let's have a little fun here and break these comments down a bit. So first off, I guess the first question would be, do we get a rationale behind that first statement? That wizard is just a crazy old man. Now, what I like about that comment, by the way, is that it's very early Star Wars, right? We, apart from young Anakin in The Phantom Menace, you know, or actually, that wasn't Anakin that said that. It was his buddy said, that's so wizard, Annie. We don't really see are Jedi being called wizards, right? So that particular statement, that wizard's just a crazy old man, I could definitely see some sort of context of something happening, an event happening that brings about why Uncle Owen would say that, some many years after the show that we're going to see, right? Some event takes place that gives Uncle Owen, and we get the context to why he would say that wizard is a crazy old man. Okay. As far as the Luke's just not a farmer, Owen, he has too much of his father in him, that's what I'm afraid of. That's what I'm afraid of could simply be Owen recalling the recklessness that Anakin showed in Attack of the Clones when he went to go find his mother. So that one, to me, seems a little less likely to be expanded upon, because you could just extrapolate out that is Uncle Owen from Attack of the Clones referencing when he saw a very young Anakin. Okay. All right, so let's move on to some of the comments between Darth Vader and Obi Wan Kenobi. Kathleen Kennedy made that infamous statement of the rematch of the century, and we talked quite a bit on that previous episode about how it doesn't break the canon to have Obi Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader meet again before the final duel on the Death Star. In A New Hope. I'm curious if they will provide, and I don't know how you do it, but one of the toughest things to watch with all of the content that we have now and the 9-film saga complete, for me personally, the one scene that takes me out the most in all the films is the battle between Darth Vader and Obi Wan Kenobi on the Death Star in A New Hope. Comparatively speaking, to even the lightsaber fight that we get in The Empire Strikes Back between Darth Vader and Luke, that first fight between Darth Vader and Obi Wan Kenobi, it's tame by comparison. If you've seen what some fans have done on YouTube, I don't know exactly what it's labeled. You'd have to go on YouTube and just look for Darth Vader, Obi Wan Kenobi, reimagined or new fight. It'll pop up. Somebody went and redid that fight. With I think they may have actually done like a combination of live actors and CGI. But it really is incredible. I talked about this I don't know, it probably feels like years ago. I talked about this a long time ago. It's one of those circumstances where I almost would not have a problem at all with Lucasfilm going in and redoing that fight scene in A New Hope for a special edition. I know the fans would cry outrage if that happened. But after I saw that fan-imagined version of that fight, I couldn't help but wonder, man, can they do that for real? So, back around to my question. I'm wondering if there is going to be an in-universe answer as to why that fight on the Death Star in A New Hope is so tame, especially compared to the last time we saw them, right? All right, so that's, again, sort of outside-the-box speculation. Let's get into the actual comments that were made by these characters. So, Darth Vader on the Death Star, when Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han, Luke, Leia, and Chewie... I'm sorry. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke, Han, and Chewie show up on the Death Star. There's a moment when Vader says, "I sense something, a presence I've not felt since." Okay, so here's the first line of dialogue from A New Hope that we could get some context for. Is there a circumstance where Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up somewhere where Vader is, and this is the first time that Vader has sensed Obi-Wan Kenobi since the events that take place in Revenge of the Sith? When we get into that lightsaber fight on the Death Star, Vader makes the comment, "You should not have come back." Okay. Now, again, all of these work minus the Obi Wan Kenobi show. But since we're getting the Obi Wan Kenobi show, I think there's an opportunity now for them to go and give us different context to what we were all assuming was context taken from Revenge of the Sith. When I met you, I was but a learner. Now I am the master. To which Obi-Wan Kenobi says, only a master of evil, Darth. Okay. Before that, we get the comments that Obi-Wan Kenobi made when he misdirected Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, right? He helped the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights. Okay, so originally, when we were dissecting what could we get in Revenge of the Sith, okay, before Revenge of the Sith came out, and then Revenge of the Sith came out, I think there was a natural assumption, at least there was by me, that help the Empire hunt down and destroy the Jedi Knights was simply what we ended up seeing in the Purge of the Jedi Knights and Revenge of the Sith. But will we potentially see more? We know that within canon, right, that other Jedi have lived. Whether you look at Jedi Fallen Order, the video game, or whether you look at Rebels, we know that there are other Jedi that are out there. So will we get an expansion on that, of where perhaps Obi-Wan Kenobi is going out and trying to help the Jedi that are out there because Vader is going and hunting them down? The most interesting comment that can be expanded on and provide further context, in my opinion, is the comment of he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. Prior to knowing that we were going to get an Obi-Wan Kenobi show set 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, there's a lack of context to that particular statement. Assumption would be that Obi-Wan Kenobi is just aware of what's happened to Anakin Skywalker. Okay. We have legend stories where he's actually left the planet, okay, where he's left Tatooine. But in terms of canon, we don't have any, at least as far as I know, and please feel free to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube. We don't have any context to how or why Obi-Wan Kenobi would know he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil, beyond just a passing knowledge of what Darth Vader has now become. This has me really, really interested because, again, is it assumptions or is it by witness? And when we get back to Kathleen Kennedy's comment about how the rematch of the century, I think this is where a comment taken from A New Hope can be provided context that matches with what Kathleen Kennedy said, and we get an event and a fight that takes place between these two where Obi-Wan Kenobi ends up seeing firsthand how Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, is absolutely more machine now than man. He is twisted and he is evil. Thus, we get the Obi-Wan Kenobi that we see in the original trilogy. So, because of all these things, I'm really excited. I was never like a lot of fans really clamoring for a return of Obi-Wan Kenobi. It fits in more with the way that I felt about the sequel trilogy, and we actually have a comment and listener feedback that we'll talk about with regard to that. In as much as I had my time with these characters, I'd like to see new characters. I get a little bit more excited about that than I do seeing old characters. So I think Ewan McGregor does a fantastic job doing Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I'm really excited to see this show because they're making it. But I guess my point is, if they weren't making it, I wouldn't be sad because I just feel like they'd be making some other content that I would enjoy. That being said, we are getting an Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I am really excited, and I'm most excited about what it is we may actually get in providing some context for these comments. Now, it could turn out that by this time next year, because I believe that they're starting in April, we'll probably end up getting the Obi-Wan Kenobi series sometime around this time, about a year from now, on the Disney Plus streaming app. A year from now, we may end up finding out that I was completely wrong, and they didn't touch upon any of those comments, and this was a total waste of time. But that's what makes doing these podcasts so much fun, right? You know what else makes doing these podcasts fun? It's when you, leave comments on YouTube or email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, and we go and do listener feedback.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, friend of the show, Shlomo, writes this. In the new Bad Batch trailer, the Omega Child appears to be a young girl who joins the Bad Batch and has some association with Kamino. I haven't told you this, John, but my uncle is Bob Chapek, the CEO of Disney. I'm not supposed to tell you, but the girl is actually a boy who dresses as a girl to avoid capture. He is in fact a clone of Obi Wan Kenobi from DNA taken from the Jedi Master while he was on Kamino. Cloney Wan Kenobi is in fact force sensitive and does not know his origin or why the Empire is hunting him. It should be a very exciting season. There is one more thing you need to know. While we in Israel do not have a holiday associated with the first day of April, this is, as I understand it, something you should write on this day. I hope I got you and everyone else who is listening. Shlomo. Your writing was good, Shlomo. You didn't get me. But your writing was good, right? I thought that was quite the tale. It was quite enjoyable. But being that it was April Fool's, no, you did not get me. But as always, man, I really do appreciate the email. All right, Michaela Perrone. I love that name, by the way. I need to put a Michaela in one of my EMBARK stories. I should really do that. I love that name, Michaela. All right, Michaela writes this. In many movies, characters are sidelined in favor of the protagonist, but without the same level of criticism. Examples, Savick in Star Trek, Myers in Hellboy, The Golden Army, Noah in Patalabor 2. P.S. Rian Johnson said that the origin of Rey was open to interpretation. And by the way, Michaela, if I butchered that Noah in Patalabor 2, I apologize because I have no idea what that is. I probably just lost some cred, didn't I? Not knowing. Like, everybody probably knows who that is. And I just totally lost some credibility. I had no idea what that. I didn't know Myers in Hellboy, The Golden Army. I did know that. All right. Miranda Alicia also wrote, it's that precious time again. The Star Wars fandom has woken up from their slumber and come together to rejoice because Obi-Wan series has more information and a filming date. Thank you, Miranda, as always, for the comment. Chris Olivo writes this. While I'm a fan of the sequel trilogy, I think they should have never extended the prequel trilogy original trilogy storyline. They should have started fresh 30 years later with a new story, but still with the old trilogy characters passing the torch. The return of Palpatine really hurts the sequel trilogy because it feels like a been there, done that, being essentially the same ending as Return of the Jedi. Lucas really ended his story after Episode 6 and didn't leave many options opened for 7, 8, 9 except taking it in a brand new direction. Yeah, I mean, they essentially did, right? They essentially did start fresh with the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It really was the introduction of Palpatine in the sequel trilogy in The Rise of Skywalker that kind of brings it back into the fold of all the films. And look, I don't disagree. I think I would have been fine if they hadn't brought back Palpatine. I'm glad that they did, again, because I love The Rise of Skywalker, and I think it's a neat ending. I think it's a cool ending that does kind of bring everything back into the fold. And when you look at The Phantom Menace and then you get to The Rise of Skywalker, I really appreciate what happens, right, with that storytelling between those two, you know, with all the movies in between. That being said, I think I also would have been fine going the same route that Chris had said. I think if they would have done that, then it would. How do I want to explain this? And I think probably there's a lot of fans that feel this way. Like if they hadn't brought back Palpatine, then I think Disney and Lucasfilm could have more easily continued the saga stories to 10, 11, 12 by furthering out the timeline, right? And I'm sure at some point that will happen. But my point is, if they hadn't brought back Palpatine and they had just resolved the situation, say, with Kylo Ren rising to power and essentially being the Palpatine, and maybe there's a right-hand man or something that's in, or something more along the lines of what Colin Trevorrow was going to do with Duel of the Fates, then I think you would have had an easier time starting off another set of stories with 10, because there wasn't that finality that 9 does in bringing the whole saga full circle. Does that make sense? You still can do, and like I said, you can still do an episode 10, 11, and 12 and bring about new stories. But I think that it would have established with that sequel trilogy that that's what the franchise was going to be doing moving forward. But like I said, I love the sequel trilogy and I love The Rise of Skywalker. So, all right. SheVP writes, and I haven't gone looking for this. If somebody wants to clue me in, please do. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, just from a pure curiosity standpoint. Apparently, there's a controversy that erupted over Reylos and social justice warriors that I'm completely out of the loop on. I don't know how I missed it. I don't know if it's because I have a bunch of those clickbait channels blocked. But SheVP writes this, and if anybody wants to clue me in, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube. But SheV writes this and says, it really ticks me off that Reylo became the convenient punching bag for the Star Wars fandom. These two SJWs that just so happen to be Reylos as well were trying to get some Fandom Menace YouTube channels taken down. And for a week, all you saw in the video titles from these clowns was Reylos trying to get us shut down. Oh, boo frickin' who. These guys absolutely thrive on drama. I left a comment on one of their vids, and I was just trying to explain to them that not all Reylos are SJWs or into cancel culture or into stalking Adam and Daisy. And the first thing I get hit with is, why do you like an abusive ship? There's just no winning. I am a Christian conservative, as am I. I have been a Star Wars fan longer than most of these guys have been alive, as have I. I saw it when it came out in 1997, as did I. SheV, are you me? Write me again, man. I want to hear more. And I love Reylo, as do I. And I love your show, John. I love my show, too. We have so much in common. LOL, thanks for another great discussion. I want the backstory on this. I don't want to go search. I know. I could probably go find it. I could probably go search the usual suspects and track down whatever the Sam heck happened with this, but I don't particularly want to. But I want to know what happened. And SheV, I'm assuming you're. Maybe it could be. You could be a girl. I don't know. But yeah, we've got a lot in common. Let's talk. All right, last, and you're all friends of the show, but friend of the show, Irene Davis, writes this with regard to last week's commentary about The Chosen One. I, too, have believed the notion of The Chosen One being a continuation for some time. Otherwise, there would be no continuation. I've stopped listening to all other podcasts apart from yours, Star Wars Coffee, and the official Star Wars site. By the way, Star Wars doesn't do their own podcast. Like, I want that gig. Like, why? Why don't they have, why doesn't, maybe I shouldn't be saying it out loud. I guess they figure there's so many fan podcasts, but why wouldn't Star Wars have their own official podcast with their own hired podcast host? I think you could do a really unique and interesting official Star Wars podcast that's put out by Disney and Lucasfilm, but that still has fun doing speculation. That's kind of what the Star Wars show was, right? Because I don't think Andy Gutierrez and, what's the other guy's name? I forgot. Anyway, Andy and Anthony. I don't think Andy and Anthony were as in the loop as a lot of us that watched that show, and I missed that show when it was on a weekly basis. I don't think they were in as much. They were in the loop as much as some of us thought that they were. So why doesn't Disney and Lucasfilm put out? That's really strange to me. Anyways, so I'm sorry, Irene. Let me get back to your comment. I am better for this, not listening to other podcasts and just taking stuff off the official site and Star Wars Coffee. And in my mind, I'm not being polluted by the garbage and hatred towards Disney and Lucasfilm. My joy is coming back and is directly contributed to your channel. Thank you, Irene. Your breakdown, your analogy suit me to the ground. Keep up the good work, rhyme and reason, and do what you do best. Comment on something you so clearly love. Best wishes from the UK. Thank you, Irene. I appreciate that. By the way, my books sell really well in the UK, and I don't know why. I wish I did, but for some reason, my EMBARK series, the Brits love EMBARK. I'm not complaining, man, but I wish I could repeat that in America. I don't know. Maybe too many people end up finding out that I'm a talk show host and they boycott me. That's a possibility. Boy, I really had fun doing the show this week. That was a good time. That was 50 minutes of solid fun. I hope you had as much fun as I did. As always, if you want to support the show, pick up my series, EMBARK. Book 1, Treasure in Darkness 2, Vanishing War 3, Gahan Corbijn and the Asteroid of Misfortune 4, and The Rocket Queen 5 now available. I'm still in the process of editing the audiobook for The Rocket Queen, but the paperback and the ebook are available, and for books 1 through 4, you can get the ebook, paperback, and audiobook available on Amazon.com. You search for Jon, Jon Justice, and EMBARK. Also, mynerdworld.net, where you can use all kinds of stuff on mynerdworld.net. I did some tweaking recently, so if you haven't been to the site for a while, go in, check it out. There's a lot of artwork up and available, and podcast links and interviews I've done with other shows, all available there at the website. But if you want to support the show, that's how you do it. You pick up a copy of my book. And please, I need reviews. I mention this quite a lot because I need more reviews. So if you have read any of the stories, right, because I need reviews for all the books, especially the newer ones, Gahan Corbijn and The Rocket Queen. But if you've read any of my stories and have not gone and left a review, please go and do so at Amazon.com. If you happen to get the books through another source, you don't have to have purchased them from Amazon to leave a review. Amazon just requires that you have spent like $50 on Amazon at some point in time to confirm that you're legit. So if you've read it through somebody else or somebody shared the book with you, we didn't purchase it directly, please go and leave a review up on Amazon too, even though you didn't purchase it from there. I really, really would appreciate it. Like I said, I need as many reviews as possible, but especially for the more recent releases, because we're low on reviews for Gahan Corbijn and definitely The Rocket Queen, but it hasn't been out that long. So go do that and write me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube. I got to know things. I want to know your thoughts on all the stuff that I talked about this week. I want to know what in the world happened with these SJWs and the clickbait sites. So clue me in, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. All right. Speaking of Obi Wan Kenobi, here he is to close things out, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.